First of all, the burden of taxation in Britain is lower, and has been for many years, than in any other of the countries of the European community, the overall burden of taxation. Secondly, you will immediately come back and say, but the marginal rates of personal taxation have been extremely high. Perfectly true, but not as high as they were in the United States until the early 1960s. It's interesting to note in passing that when the United States reduced its 90% maximum personal rate to 50%, the rate of economic growth in the United States, and I'm not suggesting cause and effect, fell from the previously very low rate of 2.5% a year to about 0.4% in the period since, so that any notion that there is an absolutely one-for-one relationship between the degree of personal taxation and efficiency is wholly mythical.
Well, thirdly, I tell you what you can do with statistics.
Well, you ought to look at the facts. It's easy to make glib remarks about statistics. Look at the fact that in Britain, over the last 30 years, during which period, according to you, Britain has been crushed by egalitarianism, whereas the United States has been soaring away in a glorious state of liberty, the rate of economic growth in Britain has been faster than that in the United States. How do you explain that?
First of all, I have to look at what the figures mean in Britain. I have to look at the way in which...
First you ought to look at them. And then...
I have looked at them, and you realize that in judging output in the government, that's judged in terms of cost, not in terms of product. And what I really ought to look at is not the rate of growth of GNP as the statisticians measure it, but the consumption available to people in forms which, as people value it, ultimate consumption. If I look at that, I get a very different picture. The statistics are very, very, as you know very well, are very easy to use. They can be used to throw light, or they can be used to cast confusion.
One should look at facts.
I agree with you.
Facts are that the amount of goods and services consumed by the government as a proportion of the national output are no higher than Britain than they are in the United States, and haven't been any time since the war.
They have risen very sharply.
Which may be the explanation of the low rate of growth in the United States.
They have risen very sharply. It has risen very sharply in the war.
In both countries.
Since the war, in both countries. Yes. It is higher in Britain than it is in the United States, properly measured.
In both cases.
The proportion, excuse me, I want to take total, excuse me, that again is a statistician's nightmare.
No,
we have to look at total government spending.
You were the one who was talking about whether or not people have freedom to choose how their money is spent. The transfers, which is pensions and other payments from government, leave the freedom as to how the money is spent in the hands of private individuals. It's only the direct consumption of goods and services where the bureaucrats are making the decisions.